Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgotten why you went there? Or maybe someone started talking to you and for a second, the word you wanted just disappeared. Most people laugh these moments off. I'm just stressed. I didn't sleep well. I've got too much on my mind. And honestly, sometimes that's true. But here's the question I want you to think about today. At what point does normal forgetfulness become something we shouldn't ignore? Because for millions of families, the early signs of dementia didn't begin with a major event. They began quietly, subtly, so subtly that people explained them away for years. And by the time the family finally realized something was wrong, the changes had often been developing much longer than anyone understood. So today, we're going to talk about the early warning signs of dementia, the signs families commonly miss, misunderstand, or dismiss as just aging. And while this video is educational only and not a diagnosis, it may help you recognize when it's time to pay closer attention. As you watch, I want you to think about this. Have you noticed any of these changes in someone you love, or even in yourself? And if you have, I'd genuinely like to hear from you in the comments. Let me tell you about a situation that doctors and families see far more often than people realize. There's a woman, we'll call her Margaret. She's 67, retired teacher, organized, intelligent, independent her entire life. Then small things start happening. She repeats the same question twice during dinner. She forgets where she parked at a grocery store she's visited for years. Nothing dramatic, nothing that immediately alarms the family. Her daughter assumes she's stressed. Her husband thinks maybe she's just distracted, and Margaret herself laughs it off. But over time, the moments become more frequent. Then one afternoon, she leaves home to drive to church, a route she's known for decades, and suddenly becomes disoriented. She ends up miles away, confused and frightened, unsure how she got there. That's the moment the family finally seeks medical help, and later they learn something heartbreaking. The signs likely started years earlier. Now, I'm not sharing this to scare you. I'm sharing it because this pattern is incredibly common, and because recognizing changes earlier often gives families more time, more support, and more options. So let me ask you something. If someone close to you started showing subtle memory changes today, would you recognize them? To understand the warning signs, we first need to understand something simple about the brain. Your brain is made up of billions of nerve cells constantly communicating with one another. These connections help you remember names, navigate familiar places, hold conversations, and manage everyday tasks. In some forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, changes begin developing slowly over time. Certain proteins can build up abnormally in the brain. Communication between cells becomes less efficient, and some brain regions gradually become less effective at processing information. One of the earliest areas affected is often something called the hippocampus, and this part matters a lot. The hippocampus helps form and organize new memories. That's why early dementia often affects recent memory first. Someone may clearly remember events from 30 years ago, but struggle to remember a conversation from this morning. And this is where families often become confused, because the person may still sound intelligent. They may still tell stories beautifully. They may still appear mostly fine, which raises an important question. Can someone seem completely normal while early cognitive changes are quietly developing underneath? Absolutely. And that's one reason these signs are so often missed. Now here's where people commonly get confused. Normal aging and dementia are not the same thing. As we age, memory can become slower. That's normal. You may forget a name temporarily and remember it later. You may misplace your glasses occasionally. You may walk into a room and lose your train of thought for a moment. Those things can happen to healthy people of all ages. But early dementia usually involves a different pattern. The issue isn't just forgetting, it's the frequency, consistency, and impact on daily life. For example, misplacing your keys occasionally? Fairly common. Forgetting what the keys are used for? That's different. Momentarily forgetting the date? Normal. Repeatedly becoming confused about the season, month, or year? That may need evaluation. And one of the biggest mistakes families make is assuming these changes are just getting older. Months pass, sometimes years pass, and during that time, the signs may slowly become more noticeable. So here's something I'd love you to answer in the comments. What's the most forgetful moment you've personally experienced recently? You might be surprised how many people relate to the same experiences. Now let's talk about the real-world warning signs families often notice first. Not textbook examples, real life. Sign number 1, repeating questions or stories frequently. This is one of the earliest patterns many families notice. The person asks the same question multiple times within a short period, without realizing they already asked it. Or they repeat the same story several times in one evening. This is different from someone occasionally retelling a favorite memory. The key difference is awareness. The person often genuinely does not remember saying it moments earlier. And families sometimes miss this because they assume the person is simply distracted. But here's the question. Have you ever caught yourself repeating something recently or noticed it in someone else? Sign number 2, getting disoriented in familiar places. This can be subtle at first. Someone takes a wrong turn in their own neighborhood. They become confused in a familiar grocery store. They suddenly feel uncertain driving routes they've known for years. And often, these moments are brushed aside after the person eventually figures it out. But repeated disorientation in familiar places deserves attention, especially if it's becoming more frequent over time. Sign number 3, difficulty finding words. This sign is incredibly common and very under-recognized. Someone pauses during conversation, struggling to find simple words they used easily before. Sometimes they substitute unusual descriptions instead. Instead of saying remote control, they might say the TV thing. Instead of microwave, they might say the food heater. This can frustrate the person because they know what they want to say, but accessing the word becomes harder. And many families notice this long before any formal diagnosis. Sign number 4, changes in judgment or decision making. Sometimes the earliest changes are not memory related at all. A person who was once financially careful may suddenly become vulnerable to scams. Someone highly organized may stop paying bills consistently. Others may neglect hygiene, household routines, or responsibilities they previously handled easily. And because these changes happen gradually, families often adapt to them slowly without realizing how different the behavior actually is. Sign number 5, personality or mood changes. This is one families frequently misunderstand. Someone who was once outgoing becomes withdrawn. A calm person becomes unusually anxious or suspicious. Others may lose social filters and say things that feel unusually blunt or out of character. And because mood changes can have many causes, stress, depression, loneliness, poor sleep, families don't always connect them to cognitive health right away. Which brings up an important question. Do you think personality changes are harder to notice than memory changes? I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Sign number 6, difficulty with familiar tasks. This is another major warning sign. Someone suddenly struggles with tasks they've done comfortably for years. Cooking familiar recipes, managing finances, following TV plots, using household appliances. The issue usually isn't intelligence. It's that the brain is having more difficulty processing sequences and organizing steps automatically. And when multiple signs begin happening together consistently, that's when it becomes especially important to seek medical evaluation. So what should families actually do? First, document what you're noticing. Keep brief notes, what happened, when it happened, and how often. This becomes incredibly useful during medical appointments because subtle changes are often difficult to describe accurately from memory alone. Second, approach the conversation gently, not with panic, not with accusations, but with care. Something as simple as, I've noticed a few changes lately, and I think it could help to talk with a doctor together. That approach usually works far better than confrontation. Third, ask about cognitive screening. Doctors can perform simple evaluations that help assess memory, attention, language, and thinking skills. And importantly, not every memory issue is dementia. Some medical conditions can create very similar symptoms. For example, vitamin deficiencies, thyroid problems, medication side effects, depression, sleep disorders, infections in older adults. Some of these are treatable, which is one more reason early evaluation matters. There's also growing evidence that certain lifestyle habits support long-term brain health. Regular physical activity, good sleep, social connection, managing blood pressure and blood sugar, staying mentally engaged. None of these are guaranteed prevention tools, but research consistently shows they are important for healthy aging overall. And honestly, many of these habits benefit the entire body, not just the brain. Now I want to speak directly to anyone watching this who feels worried. Please don't panic because of one symptom. Everyone forgets things sometimes. Everyone has distracted moments. This video is not meant to diagnose anyone. But if you're seeing repeated patterns, especially multiple signs happening together consistently, it's worth having a professional conversation sooner rather than later. Because sometimes evaluation brings reassurance. Sometimes it identifies treatable conditions. And sometimes it helps families prepare early instead of facing confusion later. And in many situations, earlier support can make a meaningful difference in quality of life. I want to leave you with one final thought. We monitor our weight. We track our blood pressure. We check our heart health. But cognitive health is something many people avoid thinking about until changes become impossible to ignore. Why do you think that is? Fear? Stigma? Denial? Or maybe simply not knowing what signs to look for? Whatever the reason, paying attention earlier is almost always better than waiting longer. So tonight, I want you to think about the people you love. Has someone been repeating themselves more lately? getting confused more often, acting differently in subtle ways? Maybe it's nothing serious, but maybe it's worth noticing. And sometimes, noticing early is one of the most caring things a family can do. Take care of your brain, and take care of the people who depend on you to notice when something feels different.